Well, hi guys, hopefully this finds you very well. My name's Paul, this is Plan Zed, and ooh la la, we've got 2 notes cab M. Pierre sent in a comment, he's got himself a 2 notes cab M, and he wants to hook it up to his GT1000, I think it is. So what we're going to do is just talk through where I've ended up with this. Now, eventually I'm going to be trying to shoot out my Boss preamps using 2 notes cab M with another GT1000 that's up here turned off at the moment, where we're going to be running that exclusively using GT1000 cabinets. But we're going to be shooting that out in this GT1000, this one here, with ToneX at a later date. No ToneX today, purely GT1000 and 2 notes for Pierre. Now, I've had a bit of a week and not feeling 100%, so bear with me, but I know he needs this info quick. So let's help him out. So we're going into 2 notes cab M at the moment. We've got a Marshall Vintage 30. We're going to talk about the settings. We're going to talk about connections. This is a medium gain Plexi back pickup. Got the gain pot on about 9. Let's go to a low gain. So we're using the Plexi preamp, the Brit stack in GT1000. I've got a divide set up where I flip between the two. Now what we're going to do is discuss how we connect things and then the levels, and then I want to look at something and then look at a couple of different cabinets and show you something there. So what's going on is the signal comes in, we hit our divide, I can pick either of my amps. Each of the amps has got a noise suppression after it. I've got a medium gain here where I can switch it to a high gain channel. When I do that, I don't change any of the settings on the amp. All the settings remain the same. I've got a starting point of 35 on the gain, 10 on the sag, resonance on 5, level of 57 in medium gain and high gain. 70, 70, 70, 70 is my starting point, okay? Now on the low gain, let's just switch to that channel. We've got the gain on 20. We're still at 10, still at 5. Got the level up at 72 there. But the bass here is up at 78, 70, 70 and 70. So we've got a bit more bass here where we've backed off the gain, just giving us a bit more bottom end in the amp. Now those two signals, as I say, this one's going into a noise suppression with threshold at 40, release at 0, set to input, and this one's got the threshold up at 70, 0 input. Now they then go into send return 2, which is where this guy is living. Now let's just turn back our gain pot a moment. Excuse me. We leave GT1000 using an instrument cable, a TS cable that has one black hoop on it, a ring, yeah? So that cable goes out of GT1000 into the input of 2 notes. So I'm going to leave that cable there. Now, on the side here, we've got control over the input level. We've got it in the middle, it's 0 dB. If we click it to the left, it takes 20 dB off, I think, and click it to the right, it adds 12 dB, I think. I'm going to put it back in the middle. Now, they suggest for you running a valve amp into this, put it on the -20, and then for instrument level and other levels, either 0 or +1, whichever you feel is running better. Now, I've run this level here, maxing it, so all the way pushed to the up or to the right, and I've run it at 0 dB as well. And what I'm finding is I prefer it at 0 dB. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the signal out of GT1000 here at instrument level, and then I'm using the level of the amp to force into the power amp here, because we're not just using a cabinet here, we're using the power amp as well. Because when you just put the cabinet on your preamp, it suddenly becomes clear it needs a power amp. So let's bring this up. Now, as I say, this is going out at 100 and coming back at 70. Now I want to talk about that for a little second. Something that's not commonly known with the GT1000, I did a little video a few months ago, is I discovered just by doing a little experiment in my darkest corner of the internet that if you use a TRS cable, tip ring sleeve, and come out of the stereo out here, which is what you're meant to use coming out of that, okay, and put that into the return of your GT1000, the GT1000 return must be balanced because I actually get both microphones. Now each on the two rings here, one is the SM57, for example, and one would be a Ribbon 121. Now, if you're using an instrument cable, a mono connection, it would be interesting to know, before I go any further, if you're using a GT1000 core, what are your send returns like? Have you tried seeing if that works? I found out by accident. Boss don't suggest it. But anyway, so the signal comes back in we've got two signal paths. It's not stereo, but it's two signal paths, okay? Now, I'll do other videos on other patches where I show you how we can manipulate the signal and get stereo spreads and different things using different EQ blocks and dividers. But we've talked about the amp, we've talked about the send return, we've talked about the connection and the little switch here. Just make sure I've got it on 0. Okay, so the other thing to just talk about is quickly the input to the GT1000. You know how to do that. I've covered that before. But let's just have a very quick look at how I'm set up. Oops, sorry about that. I want input, output. Let's just go. I'm using my sub outs. So whichever you're using, just set it the same. The output select is on line recording because we're line level. It's all happening there. I've got the EQ is flat. There's no EQ on. And the output level I've got on -10 dBu with the level at 50 here. Okay, so it's very simple, very straightforward. Now, let's come to the two notes. In the two notes cab M, when you come in here, you've got lots of little boxes, okay? We click into the first box and we can select the mode. Now, I'm in simulation mode. I'm not going to change that because it will just... I'll have to reset all the settings and I want to just leave them for us to have a look at. But I'm using simulation mode, so I've got control over the power amp and certain other parameters. You don't have to use whichever mode you want, so these settings will be relevant to that mode. Now, when you use a power amp, you want to find the right power amp for the type of amp you're going to use. So with a Plexi, it would be a push-pull. We can have different power amp tubes, so the PP is push-pull, but for example in my Twin it's single-ended, so I'm using a single-ended 6L6, but here we're using a push-pull EL34 for this case scenario, right? You can have pentode or triode. You can get your Plexi in a pentode or triode. You just modify the inside. Some of them even have a switch, I think, if I remember right. So you can play around with this. We'll look at that in just a moment. Now the level, I'm coming in with the level at 15 for my Plexi. I might choose a different level for the Fender amps, for example, because I don't want so much of the power amp distortion. Your level here is going to be giving you some of that power amp distortion that we want. The next thing to that is the depth. Now I just want to note, when I was talking to you here about push-pull and single-ended, with single-ended, you only get the first two dials on the power amp, okay? In push-pull, we get the third dial, which is presence. But this dial here is depth, and I've got that at the moment on 95. But I've got the presence at 50, all right? Now, I could have more of that depth in there, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's just move on. Now, the next thing you scroll along to if you turn the dial, but if you actually just click out, it's a box called miking. Let's go into this box. You'll see that we've got the Brit Vintage C. So this is a Vintage 30, I think, Marshall. We've got a Ribbon 121 microphone as the mic A and a 57 as the mic B. Now I've got these leveled, and what I'm going to do is just show you that when I leveled them, we're going to go into the positions of the microphone in a moment, but let's just talk about the levels for a second. I'm just going to, you can mute these, so I'm just going to mute that one there. It's gone white, it's muted. So now we're only hearing the Ribbon 121, and it feels really quiet, and I would want that louder if I was using it on its own, but I'm using the two microphones together, so we need to be mindful here. Our levels are probably going to be lower than we would have it if it was just one microphone, okay? So that's what the Ribbon 121 sounds like on its own. I've got a level of -5 dB. Let's mute that and just hear the 57. Let's put them both on together, we'll get a volume jump. Now I've got, the 57 is 1 dB quieter than the Ribbon 121 at -6. The phase is normal, but you can fit the phase if you want. Now the Ribbon 121, I've got that positioned on 32%, the distance 0, we're on the front of the cabinet. The 57 is at 28%. The distance is always the same. I keep the distances the same. And in this case, we're right on top of the cabinet at 0%, and we're in the front. Now, what I want to explain to you here is this access is obviously, if this here is the cone, what I found is that about 28% is on the edge of that cone if you're using a 12-inch cone. All right? And what I'm trying to do is I've got my 57 on the edge of the cone, and just to the other side of the 57, I've got the Ribbon 121 taking up the bottom end. So I've gone 28% on the 57, 32% on the Ribbon 121. Now we do have EQ, but I've got that off. So the next block along is the EQ block. This is now off because I'm using the EQ set in GT1000. I've got a room reverb on. So if we come into here, I'm using Studio A, and that's at 40%. Just giving me that sense that I'm in a room. Okay. Now if I come along to the end, the unit level I've got at 0 dB. Now the unit comes at -6, but what I'm doing is running the unit there and here on the master at 0 dB. What I'm going to do is just go into there. I must have made a change somewhere. So we're just going to save what we've done. So we're going to stay on the clean for a minute. Let's go to a different cabinet. Now this one, I haven't made some of the changes. So I'm just going to go in and very quickly make a bump to here. Where did I go? 95, did I say? I'm going to start with 95. So this is all the same. This is the same. I'm going to drop that by 1. This is a change I made last time I came in here. This guy wants this video, and I hadn't done this already. Let's just have a look here. Might just pull that 57 back a touch. Will it clean up? Remember, I've only got the gain at 35 at the moment. So I'm going to leave that one there like that. All the other settings are the same. I'm going to save it. Before I save it, I've forgotten, I need to talk about one more thing. In the global settings, you've got the audio performance. Now here you've got control over the latency. I've just put it on the fastest possible latency, okay? Because obviously we've got latency at GT1000, but this is really fast. I think this is less than 2 milliseconds. Whereas this, its fastest is 2.3 milliseconds. It will go to about 4.3 milliseconds, but this runs, the ToneX, for example, runs about 4 milliseconds. And all of this adds up when we go through our signal chain. Now, it adds up only in the way that it's routed, if that makes sense. So they're not interacting with each other and affecting each other. Okay, so that's those settings there covered. What I'm going to do is just save that. And maybe let's just hear one more cabinet. And what I've done is I've just been experimenting with these. And what I'll do is I'll go in, I'll have a little fiddle, balance things, and then I'll come back with a fresh set of ears, and then I'll do this, go through the lot of them, and just make the adjustments that I made to that patch. Let's have a listen to this mic position. Just gonna pull those lows. Let's come out to the. Let's try just pulling that back a bit. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so I'm going to stay with that. And as we go further into these Plexi sessions with 2 notes, we're doing the same thing with GT1000 and ToneX. But we've got a bunch of cabinets here. I'm going to have all those set up. We've got some 212s, 112s and things down here as well. I've got high watts, different things. But I'll set all of those patches up the same way and dial them in like that. Does that make sense? Now, I just want to cover quickly before I head out of Dodge, the EQ set, okay? So we're using 3 EQ blocks using parametric EQ. They're all after the cabinet. So in the first EQ, we go 0, 0, plus 3. We add level here because I'm taking out 315 on a Q of 0.5. That's like a wide bell, minus 2 dB. And then on a tighter Q, so a Q of 8, I take out 630, it's a honker, minus 6 dB, and I take out 125 hertz low cut. The third one is +1, +2, 0, taking out 2.5K on a Q of 8 minus 3, 4K on a Q of 8 minus 6, got the high cut in at 10K. Here, this EQ, I'll use this in each of the 5 patches that I'll make from these templates. And I'll shape the amp in different ways using this EQ. Now, at the moment, it's got a drop of 2 dB because the only thing I'm doing in here is boosting 1K on a Q of 0.5. And here, we've gone 3 dB, okay? Nothing else happening in that block, only that frequency, and I just drop it a bit to shape the amp, okay? Let's bring that up. Yeah, that sounds nice. At the end of the chain here, after the cabinet block of the output, because when I use GT1000 cabs, I have my compressor after the cabinet. So I just left it in the same place. I use a stereo compressor here where we've got the sustain at 50, attack at 40, level at 39, tone at 0, 1.4 to 1 the ratio, and it's 30% dry mix. Now this is barely touching and affecting our tone. It's just binding everything together when I start using wet effects. Let's get some gain. See what changing the cabinet back to the. Oh, I was on the wrong. Let's go there. That's full gain pot. I'm just going to pull back the gain pot a touch. Let's give ourselves a little clean boost clone. I've only got the gain there at 35. Let's come down the gain. I'm going to end that session there. I think I've heard what I need to hear to get me started. I don't want to spend too long working on higher gain tones, even though I'm not driving the gain very hard there. I want to protect my ears so that, you know, I can keep doing it for a few more years. I'll catch you a bit later. Hopefully you found that useful, Pierre. And please excuse my ignorance that I couldn't do this session in French. A little story for you. When I was at school, we were the guinea pigs for a change in our education system where they introduced an exam system called the GCSE. My year was the guinea pigs. They gave me a choice. I could study art or I could study French. When it came to picking art, my French teacher was Australian. So the only French I've ever learned is with a French Australian accent. So, you know, savez-vous, quel âge as-tu? So it doesn't really work. So I thought I'd stay off it. And yeah, excuse my ignorance. Hopefully you found it useful. Take care. Bye.